economic and industry specific factors that are influencing asbestos filings in this coming year. What are your thoughts on that? And I'm going to go ahead and start with Michelle.
Can you ask your question again?
Sure. Attendee wanting to know, how might economic or industry specific factors influence asbestos filings in the coming year? I know you touched on a little bit of how we're going to see these, but again, those economic and industry specific factors.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure I'll be interested in Lawrence's and Marc's view. I think we'll also see more talc allegations and complaints from an industry perspective, because a lot of the traditional industry asbestos exposures just, we're not, seeing those anymore. So it'll be, and, I'm still having clients call me where they're receiving their first asbestos lawsuit filing this year, when it's, been a litigation here since the 70s. So I'm always surprised by that. So I think we'll perhaps see additional industries brought into the litigation. But I'm interested in Marc and Lawrence's thoughts on that as they're litigating these cases.
From an economic standpoint, personally, I don't think that is a factor in determining an increase or decrease in asbestos lawsuits. If an individual is diagnosed with a disease which can be attributed to asbestos, there is enough data on the computer and the internet to direct them to a firm that can help them and handle a case on their behalf. So I don't think the economy dictates this litigation. I think it's the disease factor, and also just a wide range of reference materials that one can turn to, not only in terms of where they can get assistance medically or legally, but information so that they can think back on their life and where they may have had some level of exposures. And quite frankly, I think people are still being exposed to heavy doses of asbestos. By way of example, recently I was walking to a fast food restaurant, and someone was in line and they were 30 and they were talking to their friend, and I heard them talk about they're renovating an old house. And I just happened to say, how old was the house that you were renovating? It was built in the 1920s. What type of materials were you renovating? Were you ripping out? And they started to describe it to me. And I said, what type of protection were you wearing? I was just trying to make sure that the area was well ventilated, no respiratory protection. So there's the likelihood that there was asbestos either within the plaster or the flooring or even the ceiling material is great. And I think as much information as there out there, once you develop an asbestos disease, I don't think there's a lot of preventative literature out there for the ordinary person that might just encounter it renovating a home or changing brakes on a vintage car or something of that sort.
Yeah, I'll step in. It's a great question, and then sort of a unique perspective. I mean, I'll say this: I think the asbestos litigation is an industry. I mean, it is. It's run that way. The plaintiffs' attorneys have been very creative in terms of using the playbook that was used against the original asbestos defendants, so Owens Corning Fiberglass, Pittsburgh Corning, Celotex, whomever, and using that playbook against additional defendants for recovery. And I think that's what's kept the litigation going for this period of time. There was an effort by Congress to regulate asbestos litigation back in 2003, 2002, that narrowly was defeated to bring it to take it out of litigation and to make it more like a workers' compensation program that failed. I don't know if there's any energy for that at this point, but there have been so many bankruptcies. I know Marc knows about this probably more than anyone. hundreds of companies have been bankrupted by litigation, and more are contemplating that as well. The special 524 section efforts to have these bankruptcy trusts that pay money to individuals, that is obviously well documented on television ads and whatnot. So it remains to be seen, you know, the impact of litigation on industry, and any effort by certain industries to more heavily regulate the asbestos litigation industry, if that makes sense.
And there's recent legislation limiting use of asbestos in total in the United States. I think it came down, was it October, November, where it can't even be used. It cannot be processed in this country anymore, which is going to force it to be done out of country and then transported into the U.S. if it's necessary.
Yeah.